Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Chrono here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be going over the new Melek weapons that have popped up on the game, post-maintenance. But if you're new here, as always, my name is Chrono. I primarily cover PSO2 content. I'd much appreciate a subscribe as we work our way towards that 10K mark. Hopefully, I don't know, man, eventually. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. So to start things off, we're over on the Visiphone website. Let me get that pulled up for you. So with Visiphone, this is where we gather most of our information from. It's kind of like just a fact check, mostly for me, as we do most of our calculations over on Cakewalk's damage calculator. But I do usually want to double check here to make sure that things do match up as they're supposed to. This does run a bit slow, so we have preloaded some of the pages as it's the day after patch day, and people tend to want to look into how weapons and things are doing. The website is loading a bit slow at the moment, but that's totally fine. Let's take a look at these Melek weapons. Start things off, we're going to look at the soaring blade. What you'll find is that the potential is basically the same as the relic weapons, with a difference in potency. The secondary portion of the potential is still exactly the same. So these are still HP, this is still PP, this one is still the crit, and this one is still the area damage. When it comes to the different Melek weapons, it's worth noting that the weapons are kind of sectioned off. So like the hunter weapons, and I believe this weapon here, they have the HP potential. I believe the fighter weapons and the katana all have the AoE potential. If I remember correctly, the range, actually, you know what? I never looked at the gunblade. I'm going to load that now and we'll take a look at it in a moment. But the range weapons have the crit potential, which I think is actually the strongest one out of all of them. And then the, you know what? I also didn't check this either. And then the tech weapons have the PP potential. So we can pop over really quick and take a look. It looks like, ooh, you know, Slayers are going to be eating real good, like really good. This is going to be a very, very powerful weapon for Slayers. And then it looks like, okay, yeah, they have the tech potential, so that's cool. So overall, when you're looking at the different weapons, they do have different potentials. It is worth noting, if you're someone who plays a class that benefits highly from a multi-weapon setup, in previous iterations of this weapon with the relic, whenever you multi-weapon them, they would take the potential of whatever the base weapon was. So whatever like your primary weapon was, and then like the weapon that you multi-weapon to, it would just use the same potential as the primary weapon. Now, this isn't always the case when it comes to multi-weapons. With multi-weapons in other situations, like let's say, for example, the main class damage bonus, whenever you use the secondary weapon or whatever it's multied with it still applies as being its being the other weapon you're holding in your hand. So let's say, for example, you're playing hunter and you multi-weapon a sword with a rifle. Well, the sword has this potential, so it has this HP, you know, extra HP recovery potential, and damage resistance potential. Whatever the rifle, the potential for the rifle we know is the crit chance potential. However, because it's multi-weaponed, it still uses the potential from the sword. Even though the fact that it's multi-weapon does not mean that it gains the 10% damage buff that you get from playing the main class weapon, because it doesn't apply as a main class. It still functions physically as a rifle in your hands. It still uses the potential from the sword. So it's a little bit weird. Now that's how it worked with relic weapons and how it's worked with every other weapon that's similar, has a similar issue in its series, where it has one series, but you know, multiple different potentials. But it's worth mentioning it. If this is not how it's working now, or if they've changed this, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'll update the pinned comment or include it in the description. But it's worked like this for everything else, so I have no reason to believe that it wouldn't. So in some cases, you may decide to pick up, like, let's say, for example, you're someone who plays primary katana. If it were me, I would probably pick up a cheap range weapon and then multi with the katana and just take advantage of the fact you have the better potential, because I believe this is like the worst potential of all of them. It's not bad for AoE situations, but it's not great with it. You know, it's 10-second ICD. It's just a chunk of damage that's happening that doesn't look affected by anything else. So not really a fantastic thing. We're going to be jumping over to Cakewalk's damage calculator just as a heads up. You know, so if you're someone who's not super big on spreadsheets, I'll leave a link in the video description, or I'll try to leave a timestamp when we exactly find out how things are going to compare, how they're going to shake up, and the overall choice at the end of it. But also know that it's going to be bright. It's a bit of a flashbang into the spreadsheet. So one sec. Here we are over on Cakewalk's damage calculator. Again, apologize for the flashbang. A link to it will be in the video description. In case you're someone who's never used this before, just grab that link, click here and click on make a copy, and you'll be good to go. I do have an entire video showing off how this works, how you can set it up for yourself, so we're not going to go into too many details there. Just know that we have this set to our main class at the moment, and our augments that we have it set to are going to be what we kind of use at the moment, basically. Now, this one's not exactly the same as mine, but it's mostly the same for what we're looking for at the moment. The class is set to Bouncer Slayer. It's worth mentioning that anything that's giving us potency floor is not doing anything right now, because no matter how much potency floor we have a 100% crit chance. You can still have 100% crit chance by looking at our effective damage. If we were to tick the thing that says downed, notice all these other weapons change, but our effective damage doesn't change because we're already at 100%. Getting that extra 10% or 15% crit chance does nothing for us. So cool stuff there. Looking at the weapon, we can see that we have Gladia, Hal Finale, Gigas Maste, Might, a capsule. Capsules are 4%. All we care about is, is potency, nothing else. And then High Domina. This can be replaced with like a B triple or something like that. That's 2%. You don't want to use a def triple because it's 2.5, but street triple is 3. So that's pretty awesome. If you're someone's like, oh, I don't have this set up, it's, mine's not as powerful, it's fine. LC is fine. And then, like I said, speed triple is fine. Like, it's a much cheaper overall setup you can go for. And then of course the doable stuff is also cheap if the case speed triple is too much for you. So either way, also the scratch exists right now. If you're watching this, when right about the time it went live, the scratch is still up for another week, meaning that a lot of these capsules are very, very cheap. It's worth grabbing them if you don't already have one, because all we care about again is the potency. That's all across the board. It's like the same thing all the way down. So we can see our effective damage is about 3k, 3.073. We're looking at effective damage at the moment because for the other weapon types, we need to re-augment how we have ourselves set up. So we want to look at how much stronger overall the weapons are going to be, because comparing this versus like just swapping over to, let's say, the Fuel Guard or the Melek weapon, it's not really a fair comparison to make at the moment, considering that you can augment yourself with these other weapons and be much more powerful. And then using those other augments on this weapon is actually a weaker choice for it. So I can even look right now if we were to do a comparison, and you can see the Flugel Guard is only 4% because we're missing a ton of potency. We're missing a ton of potency floor. So I could just, like, let's say swap this to Fuel Guard, no fixa, and we're getting what, 32, which is not great. We can get a lot more out of this. So we'll be swapping around these augments really quick, and I will show you guys what we're up to once we get those things swapped out. So one sec. All right, so now we're taking a look at the Fuel Guard weapon. Now with the Fuel Guard, we can see that we actually get a pretty sizable damage buff. What we've only done here is we've just swapped out our stat for Grand Dreadkeeper. If I could speak, it might help. We swapped out for Grand Dreadkeeper. That's going to be your better choice overall when it comes to augments. I know it's expensive. Realistically, you can go with something like Mastery 4, but you're going to see a little bit of a drop off. You don't want to bother with Dreadkeeper 4 or Dreadkeeper 5, honestly. While you might see a bit of a difference in damage with Dreadkeeper 5 when you're kind of messing around with this, the more of them that you use, the less effective they end up being. And yes, I know you get HP and PP, that's totally fine. But realistically speaking, it's not worth putting that much in. If you're going to use any of them, you want to go for Grand Dreadkeeper. If you do put a Dreadkeeper in, just put one in, don't put any more than that. Across all of your gear. Like when I say one, I mean like on one of your weapon, or on your weapon or one of your units, realistically speaking. Outside of that, it's not really worth it. Just go with like Mastery 4. They're super cheap these days because not everyone uses them. I'm sure the price has gone up a bit since weapons have changed around, but it is definitely worth going ahead and slotting that in instead of anything else. Don't touch Mastery 4 LC. Mastery 4 LC is literally weaker than other options that are available, so I wouldn't bother with it. I mean, the potency floor is nice, but you don't want to give up potency for potency floor. The idea is that you want to get as much potency as you can along with potency floor. The only exception to the rule is literally Grand Dreadkeeper because it's 5% potency floor with 2.5% potency. That's a lot of numbers, a lot to talk about, but the TLDR is just use Grand Dread or use Mastery 4. Either one of those is fine and you're good to go. Also, we didn't go with Spee Dread because it doesn't have any Spee Deft because it doesn't have any damage resistance. So I said Mastery 4 in that situation. All right, so we're looking at the weapons. We can see that we have quite a few weapons that aren't super far behind. We can see Vershmelt is super far behind because it's not using its ideal augment setup. But when it comes down to it, it's not that bad overall. I mean, it's kind of bad. Let's be honest, it's pretty bad, but it's not the worst in the world. So we're looking at Fugal Guard. With Fugal Guard, we've got it set to the baseline of no fixa, and we take a look at something like, let's say, I said the crit weapon here is some of the strongest. You can see it's 7% behind. Yeah, that blows, but realistically, when you have that much crit chance, what you want is a bit of crit damage. You want to fix a terminal 1, realistically. That's going to get you a good chunk of damage. So that is a realistic place to be in. As you can see, that's less than 5%. If we take a look at the HP ones here, we want fix a fatale because we don't have that extra crit chance that, that the crit weapon has. So we have to go with fatale to give us a bit more crit chance to bump us up to that, magical 60, 65 breakpoint that we really want to go towards. The closer we get to it, the more crit damage we want over crit chance, but that's another conversation for another video. I don't want to make the video too long. But you can see with Fix Fatale, we're again at that 3.77, which is closer than the Termina, but of course it's a different weapon type, which has more potency floor, or not potency floor, but more overall potency. So you can see that we have 3.7 or 3.77 as what we've got here. So again, less than 4%. So we're in that 4% bracket here that we're looking around. When it comes to the other choices, we have other fixes that are here. The Fixa Alpinac is kind of cool. As you can see, it is actually pretty good, where we've got Terminal 1, or Almanac 1 is actually stronger than Fatale when it comes to the regular weapons. But when it comes to the crit weapon, it's not as good as Termina. So it's just worth keeping in mind. It's a good choice. If you have it, it's not bad. And this is using 6 unique augments, which is just the augments on your weapon. And that's totally fine for what you're going for. This is, I'm sure people are going to ask you, is it worth it to augment a bunch of other things across your other weapons? I haven't done research into Almanac past just looking at its potential, and with the 6 unique augments we have currently for it, if it applies for all of the stuff all the way down, I haven't looked into that, so I don't want to talk about that past this, but we'll do a video talking about it at some point. This weak point augment is cool if you have access to weak points almost all the time. I'm just going to say, if you're playing with a ranger who's staying on top of their stuff, then sure, this is great. Anytime outside of that, it doesn't really matter, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you play with like a fixed group and you always have a ranger, or you're a ranger yourself, this is actually kind of goated, even in a situation where we're looking at the is it even better than the crit weapon? It is a little bit better than the crit weapon. So in the case of being a ranger, since you have the weak point up yourself, this is actually pretty good. So definitely worth going into when you're looking at the Fugal Guard weapon. Now we do have to do one more comparison so we can kind of see overall when we're looking at not Slayer. Basically, the difference here is it goes up to 3336, which, remember beforehand I believe it was 3076, which is about an 8-ish% damage bump over the Verschmelz weapon. And then these are about 3 to 4%. So I mean, when you have the proper fix, we have no fixa, it's 5 to 7%. But when you have the proper fix at the very least, which isn't too bad to get a hold of. I mean, granted, most people are running without fixes, so you're looking at more of like the 5 to 7 bracket in a lot of cases. But if you can at least get a fix, that's not too terribly bad. Still fairly strong overall. And if you're looking at an 8% damage difference, while this is about a 5% damage difference, that means your Melek weapon is going to do roughly a 3 to 4% damage difference over your Verschmelz weapon. And that's going to give you more flexibility overall because that gives you less flexibility overall because you're actually kind of locked into needing Slayer as a subclass. In most cases, unless you're playing a class that can't use sub Slayer, then hey, that's totally fine. But we are going to do one more segment really quick where we just talk about Slayer, because Slayer is a bit of a different beast since it is not touching Verschmelz at all, and it's looking at something like Neos Astrian. So give me a sec while I move things around, and we'll be right back. All right. So, I think I missed one thing. One sec. All right, I had missed switching around the classes. It's important to make sure you have Slayer set as your main if you're looking at this perspective. So we're looking at a Neos Astrian with Termina 3. I feel like Termina 3 is pretty reasonable to get a hold of when it comes down to it. And you can already see that the Neos Astrian Termina 3 is already 3345. What a difference comparatively to our Verschmelz, by the way, with our bouncer, but that's a conversation for another day. And as we take a look at the comparisons, it's much easier to do this because you're using the best in slot setup for all of them. I mean, basically, realistically, you're using the same setup for all of your weapons when it comes to playing Slayer. You want potency floor as much as possible while also maintaining potency as much as possible because you already have a ton of crit chance. You're not at 100% crit chance, so potency floor isn't completely useless to you, not yet. but it is quite a bit of crit chance, and you can still benefit from having that potency floor. So term 3 is what we're sitting at for our baseline. If we jump down to something like, let's say, the Melek weapon, we can see that at base, they're not going to be stronger. Even the crit weapon, it's close, but it's not going to be stronger. The reason we're only looking at the crit weapon in this situation is because it's the gunblade, and the gunblade, the strongest thing you're going to want is the crit weapon in most cases. I don't know why you would get the gunblade and then multi it with, any of the other weapons. If you want to do that, sure. If you had access to do that, sure. But it's a 1.3% damage bump, which doesn't feel like worth it. And if you take a look at just like the crit weapon with what, fix a 1, bam, you're already at 3.5%. It's a pretty massive buff. Comparatively to a Fugal Guard, if you have one of those, I mean, a Fugal Guard with Termina 1 is absolutely insane. But with nothing, just no buff, no extra anything, you're looking at about 7%. So the difference there, realistically speaking, the Melek weapon versus like, something like the Fugal Guard is, I mean, it's about a 3% damage difference on average, nothing too crazy. Yes, you're always going to go Terminal when you're looking at Slayer. The other weapons I don't believe stand a chance. Let me double check really quick. I mean, just looking at the weak point one, it's like not even a percentage higher at its highest. So it's you just want to stick to simplicity. So you stick to Termina, and that's really about it. So overall, I guess the short answer is, when you're looking at the new Melek weapons, are they worth it? If you don't have a verse melt already set up, definitely. If you are a Neos Astrian player, basically if you're a Neos Astrian, you're playing Slayer, it is definitely an upgrade as well. But the upgrade you're looking at is roughly between a 3 to 5% damage bump overall over verse melts whenever you're looking at it for either of the class types, whether it's Slayer or not Slayer. If you have a Fugal Guard, this is a mute conversation. You don't even need to worry about it. You're all set to go. Somehow this video still managed to be about 17 minutes. I wanted to keep it down as much as possible, but I also don't want to skimp out on the important information. Hopefully this helped out. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments below. Like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to keep it with more. I'll see you all next time. Take care, guys. Peace out.